Welcome to A Happy Life, a podcast dedicated to providing science-based education and tools for adding more happiness to your life.
Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Joshua Swift, professor of psychology at Idaho State University, licensed clinical psychologist, and author of Becoming Happy, a guide to self-care and holistic well-being. On today's episode, we're going to talk about how finding purpose and meaning in life can bring happiness. But before we get started, let me just remind you to hit subscribe or follow below so you never miss any of our future episodes. And please share with others. So, in today's episode, we are talking about finding purpose or meaning in life. But what does that actually mean? Is it that you have to know the answer to the three big life questions of where do I come from? Why am I here? And what will happen after I die? Now, having an answer to these questions can definitely give one's life direction and meaning. Perhaps that is one of the reasons why religious individuals tend to be happier than those who are not religious. But that is not what we are talking about in this episode. Although it can give one's life direction, you don't have to know the secrets of the universe in order to be happy. As some have put it, there is a difference between understanding the meaning of life and finding meaning in life. So rather than thinking about a universal truth, in this episode, we are going to focus on things at an individual level. In other words, we are going to discuss the subjective experience of purpose that one can have throughout their life. This includes the belief that one's life and the things that one does are meaningful. In the field of psychology, research has suggested that the idea of meaning in life boils down to three main components. The first is comprehension or coherence. This is the idea that one can make sense of the world and one's experiences in it. It doesn't mean that one understands everything, but overall, there's a general feeling that one knows how the world works, that things don't just occur chaotically in a random order. And this general knowing about the world seems to be a foundational piece for believing that one can have a purpose for it. Let me give an opposite example. I love playing card and board games with my children. A little while back, though, my son tried to teach me this game that didn't have any rules. Well, it had some rules, but he wasn't going to tell us them. We had to figure them out as the game went on. And to further complicate things, he could change the rules as we played. Now, I did not like this game at all. And because I didn't understand how it worked, I didn't feel like what I did in it had any meaning or purpose. And after a few minutes, I ended up quitting. Conversely, in life, if we have a general grasp on how things work, then we can more easily see what our purpose or role is in it. Now, we can improve our comprehension by studying and learning about the world and by gaining many diverse experiences. But again, no matter what efforts we put into it, we're never going to understand everything in life. There may be times where we question why something happened in a certain way. And many aspects of life may seem random. If we dwell on that randomness, though, we can often feel lost or stuck and become anxious or depressed. Instead, if we approach these confusing times with attitudes of acceptance and trust, then they will be much easier for us to get through. So it is not always the circumstances that are important and whether we understand them completely. Instead, it is the lens through which we choose to view them that makes the difference. The second component of meaning in life is purpose. Purpose specifically refers to having a sense of direction that guides one's behaviors. This purpose can be at the global or whole life level, in which case it is usually tied to having goals that one is working toward. For example, one of my major life goals right now is to raise children who turn into happy adults, who are kind and care about others. Now, purpose can also be at the individual behavior level. For example, I have a reason or rationale for why I walk my children to the bus every morning. Both are important. Having comprehension, the first component of meaning in life, gives the world order. Having purpose gives our actions order. When we have this, we are not just aimlessly wandering through life, but instead we have a focus that guides much of what we do. And usually this focus or motivation has to have an internal locus of control. We have to feel like we are in charge of what we do. In other words, if there's a direction or order to your behaviors, if someone else is making you do them and you don't buy that rationale, it won't feel like there's much purpose to it. My wife and I hear this all the time from our teenagers. Sometimes we give them the direction for their behavior when we tell them they can't do one thing or they have to do something else. Although we have a rationale in mind, they don't always get that purpose. And so they often ask, why? Or protest and say, what's the point? Now, the third component to meaning in life is a feeling that one's actions matter or that they have significance. Part of this is the belief that the actions that one is taking will be effective, that they will lead to the attainment of the goals. The other part of mattering is that the actions are important or valuable. And it is not just the individual actions that one takes, it also includes one's life as a whole. It is a belief that the world in some way is better because of the role one plays in it. For some people, this ambition might be grand, and they believe they are making a major positive impact on many. With this, it is the belief of impact that leads to happiness, not desires or actual outcomes. So one really can be happy in their delusions. Now, for others, the belief of importance and significance can be found in seemingly smaller beneficial impacts that they have on those in their immediate surroundings. This can include things like believing that one makes life easier for a family member, a neighbor, or a friend, believing that one can pass on important wisdom to others, or even believing that one can brighten the day of those they come across by smiling at them or saying hi. Now, the existing research clearly demonstrates that individuals who experience a higher meaning in life also experience a greater amount of life satisfaction, well-being, and happiness. This is true for the construct meaning in life as a whole, as well as for each of the three components that I just discussed: comprehension, purpose, and significance. To date, there have been several meta-analyses that have been conducted attempting to synthesize the results from hundreds of studies examining the benefits of meaning in life. Let me briefly review a couple, both of which have important implications for how we approach this variable. In the first one, the authors examined the relationship between the belief that one has a calling and other positive life outcomes. This belief that one has a calling fits well with the meaning in life components of feeling like one's life has a direction or a purpose, and that purpose is important. And based on data from 201 different studies, the researchers found that calling was significantly predictive of both work and life satisfaction, as well as effectiveness. However, they also wanted to know if there were certain types of callings that were more predictive of happiness. Now, I mentioned earlier that purpose and direction have to be internally motivated. You have to have some level of personal desire to work toward the goals in order for them to be meaningful to you. However, it doesn't mean that the impacts also have to be internal. You can find some activities meaningful because they benefit you in some way. For example, they might fulfill a passion, give you joy, improve your mental or physical health, and help you learn a new thing. These activities are both internally motivated and internally focused. On the other hand, you might find other activities meaningful because they address an important need in others. These activities are also internally motivated, but they are externally focused. And of course, there might be some activities that are both. Let me share two personal examples of the difference. When I was young, the two big sports that I participated in were track and baseball. I loved both and found both to be very meaningful. Now, during their respective seasons, I would spend many hours practicing, trying to improve my skills and get better. For track, my focus was internal. I worked on my running primarily for self-fulfillment. I loved the feeling of running fast and felt a huge sense of accomplishment when I crossed the finish line first. For baseball, my focus was external. I wanted to improve my batting, catching, and throwing skills so our team could win. Now, a second example for me can be found in reading. And this may sound odd given that I'm a professor, but reading isn't one of my favorite activities. But I still do find it very meaningful. When I read a classic, the meaning comes from an internal focus. I feel like I'm being lifted in some way because of that activity. Maybe it sparks new knowledge in me or opens me up to new perspectives. When I read a picture book to my kids, the meaning comes from an external focus. I usually don't find those books all that funny or engaging, but reading them is very important to me because I know that my children are enjoying it and it helps them learn and grow. So back to the meta-analysis. Based on the data from those 201 studies, the researchers found that perceptions of meaningfulness of work was most strongly tied to an external focus. But experiences of job satisfaction were more strongly linked to an internal focus. But for life satisfaction, subjective well-being, and positive affect, external and internal focus performed equally well. From this research, we can see that engaging in both types of activities, ones that have a benefit for others and ones that have a benefit for oneself, are important and can bring happiness. In the second meta-analysis that included data from 148 different studies, the researchers also found that meaning in life was significantly predictive of subjective well-being. However, the direction of that prediction depended on the meaning of life state one was in. On the one hand, presence of meaning in life was positively correlated with subjective well-being, showing a moderate effect. So in other words, those who experienced a higher level of meaning in life also experienced a higher level of happiness, while those who experienced less meaning in life were less happy. But on the other hand, searching for meaning in life was negatively correlated with subjective well-being, showing a small effect. So those who were more active in searching for meaning in life were less happy, while those who were not searching were happier. So does this mean that we should never search for meaning? Well, not necessarily. Instead, I think it is important to keep the end in mind. Searching may lead to small temporary cost in happiness. But once you do find that meaning, life satisfaction and well-being will follow. So in the long run, searching is worth it. So how can we improve the meaning we find in life? Well, researchers have identified several different strategies, and I like to group them into two main categories: doing things that give you purpose and finding purpose in whatever you are doing. First, in order to build more meaning in life, you need to spend your time doing things that give you purpose. Now, this recommendation may sound obvious, but it is not something we always do. Across the world, on average, the largest portion of one's waking hours are spent in work or school. And although work and school can be meaningful for some, the top thing that most people consider when deciding about a job or a career is the salary. Work-life balance, well-being, and the ability to do something you are good at are all considered less important by the general population. But when it comes to life satisfaction, the variables are flipped. Prioritizing a job or career that is based on your values will provide you with more lifelong happiness than a higher paying one will. Outside of work, the second biggest portion of time goes to household jobs or screen time, depending on which country you live in. When it comes to purpose and meaning, the screen time is particularly concerning. Even though 72% of US teens report that they feel peaceful when they don't have their smartphone, in one large-scale survey, nearly half reported that they are online and using it almost constantly. But it's not just teens. Almost half of the adolescents in this same survey reported that their parents get distracted by their phones when they try to talk to them. So think about those numbers for a second. Although nearly 75% of US adults rate spending time with family as the most important thing they can do, the time that we actually spend with our loved ones each day on average is very small. In fact, one report indicated that the average was just 37 minutes per day spent in quality family time. And even when we do spend time with our children and significant others, we let our electronic devices get in the way. Now, other portions of our time that are spent on eating and taking care of our hygiene. When we take these behaviors and add them to work or school, household chores, and screen time, we have little time left to develop purpose-driven behavior. So how do we switch this pattern? Well, first, we need to think about what we value most. Researchers have used a number of techniques to get participants to think about their values and the life that would be most meaningful to them. Some of the most popular strategies are imagining oneself in the future, reminiscing on happy times from the past, thinking about one's death or writing a personal obituary, journaling, and expressing gratitude. Now, testing out and engaging in various social groups such as clubs and organizations, friend groups, or religious denominations can also help you figure out what types of activities you find most meaningful and fulfilling. And once we have our values figured out, we can plan out our day or week based on them. You can do this by pulling open a weekly calendar and blocking out all of the times that are spent on the necessary things. Things like sleeping, eating, schoolwork, taking care of your hygiene, and household chores. Then look at your values and plug into the calendar different activities that are specifically related to them. Now, the time doesn't always have to be exactly proportional to the importance of each value, but it should play a role in some way. Make sure you get all of your most important values in at least once a day, and the moderately important ones at least once a week. Then you can schedule in screen time or other non-necessary and non-important activities as space allows. Last, look at your schedule and see where adjustments might need to be made. Perhaps there's some essential activities that you realize you're spending too much time on. Maybe you could get off work a little earlier, or maybe all of your clothes don't have to be perfectly ironed. And perhaps there are also some essential activities that you could alter to include some of your values in them. For example, if your job choice is not addressing any of your values, is there a way to change it some so it does? Can you make eating time also positive family time by turning off all screens and putting away all phones? Can you work side by side with your children as you teach them how to cook or complete other household chores? Last, as you look closely at your calendar, you may realize that there are some non-essential, non-important things that you simply need to cut or at least reduce significantly. Once you create a schedule that aligns more closely with your values, place it somewhere that you will frequently see it, and then work hard to follow it exactly. Now, I remember a time in my life when I felt like the attention I was giving to my family wasn't matching up to the value that I placed on them. So I decided to make some changes. First, I took a look at my work. Now, it wasn't possible for me to just quit my job so I could spend 100% of my waking hours with my wife and children. My work did make a necessary financial contribution to our family, and it did match onto other values that I also had. But I could spend a little less time at work so I could be there to take my children to school on some days and then walk them home on others. I could also take advantage of my flexible schedule more to attend more of their school assemblies and extracurricular activities. And when I was at home, I could do a better job at setting my work aside and making sure I was focused on family time instead. In addition to work changes, I also started to invite my children to participate with me in some of the other necessary or value-based activities that I had in my schedule. Things like folding laundry, mowing the lawn for an elderly neighbor, serving in my church, and enjoying the outdoors. As I included them more, I definitely had to change my expectations for some. For example, I couldn't go on as challenging of hikes, or the mowed lawn was no longer as precise. But as my children became involved, the activities became much more fulfilling to me. I also realized that on almost a daily basis, I was sacrificing some of my family time to play some mindless computer games. Just a small amount, 5 or 10 minutes here and there. And this activity was neither essential nor meaningful to me. So I cut it out completely and replaced it with 5 or 10 minutes of conversations or games with my children instead. All of these small changes made a big difference in helping me focus my time on the thing that I valued the most. And this brought much more purpose and happiness to my life. Now, at the time, we were also living in Alaska. Although our surroundings were beautiful and I had a great job there with good colleagues, we didn't get to see much of our extended family. And this was another important value of mine. My wife and I wanted to be able to see our parents and siblings more often, and we wanted our children to know their grandparents, their aunts and uncles, and their cousins. So we made the decision to move. And after interviewing, I was offered jobs at 2 different universities, both of which were located in hubs that were closer to our extended family. One was a 12-month faculty position that would require longer hours on a weekly basis. And the other was a 9-month faculty position that would allow me to have more flexibility in my schedule. And although the 12-month job offered me nearly twice the salary as the 9-month one did, the decision was easy. I picked the one that afforded me more family time. So in summary, step number 1 is to structure your life in a way that aligns with your values. But we are all going to face times and situations when that is not entirely possible. We can't control everything. For example, work opportunities might be limited, and we may need to just take the job that we can get. Or we may have to face stressful situations that are outside of our control or choosing, like a natural disaster, a death of a loved one, or physical limitations from an aging body. And there are some things that we just have to do out of necessity, even if we don't really love doing them, like cleaning the bathrooms, washing the dishes, or taking out the trash. In these situations, we can find happiness by identifying some level of purpose or meaning to them. Now, Viktor Frankl, who's the founder of logotherapy, which is a psychological intervention based on meaning making, developed his theories on the importance of purpose and meaning after he was imprisoned in a concentration camp during World War II. I first came across his well-known book, Man's Search for Meaning, as an undergraduate student majoring in psychology. Now, in it, Frankl describes his experiences and observations as a concentration camp prisoner during World War II. He discusses the powerful role of meaning-making, even in the worst of times. Specifically, he mentioned 3 types of purpose activities that aided in his and others' survival during the horrific situations that they had to face. These included the completion of tasks, caring for another person, and facing suffering with dignity. Now, hopefully, none of us will ever have to go through what Viktor Frankl and others were forced to experience during World War II. But we can apply the same principles to the difficult or even just boring things that we do have to face in life. My wife shared an experience with me that really helped her years ago when she was a new mother at home, raising our young children. She loved our children and was so grateful that she got to spend her days at home with them, taking care of them and teaching them during this important developmental time in their lives. However, much of her days were also filled with never-ending tasks, like wiping noses, picking up toys, and changing diapers. And at that point, life became a bit monotonous for her, but at the same time was still very exhausting. At one point, though, she heard another mother share her experience with finding meaning in these trying activities. That mother was also feeling overwhelmed with all of these tasks that seemed so tedious, up until she discovered a purpose or meaning in them. Instead of just viewing it as the 10,000th diaper that had to be changed, she realized that it was an opportunity to provide comfort and care for someone whom she loved deeply. And this resonated strongly with my wife, and it helped her change the lens by which she viewed these activities. By changing that lens and finding purpose in these small daily chores, she felt a sense of reward and satisfaction through them, and her overall meaning in life improved. Similarly, there may be elements to your job or a household chore that seem mundane, tedious, tiresome, or mindless. But if you can accept that they need done and focus on the importance of the service that the task provides, either to yourself or to others, then you may be able to find meaning in them as well. And as a result, your life will be happier. And the same is true when we have to face difficult circumstances. The burden of negative life experiences can often become easier to bear when we think about the things we can learn from them. In this vein, several studies have shown that those who coped best through the COVID-19 pandemic were those who were better able to see meaning in life and orderliness to events in the world during that time. In summary, finding meaning in life is an important way to not only obtain happiness, but also to build a life where you are flourishing and thriving. Meaning in life has three central elements: being able to make sense of the world and feeling like you have some control over your circumstances in it, thinking that things that you do and your life as a whole has some purpose or direction to it, and believing that you can have an impact, either on the lives of others or on your own growth and well-being. And one can cultivate a feeling of meaning in life by planning a daily or weekly schedule based on values and by identifying some element of purpose in necessary tasks in the difficult life situations that one has to face. Finding meaning isn't always easy, but when it does come, happiness and fulfillment should follow. Well, thank you for joining us today on A Happy Life. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe or follow below to receive notification of all of our future episodes. And please share with others. Take care until next time.